All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? We've been doing this podcast for a little over 3 years now. And I'm honestly just getting sick of doing this podcast because I hate everything about you, Brian. You know that?
Well, it's been a while, and every time that I look at this, put on this podcast, don't you know, it makes me laugh.
No, absolutely. But you know what? I apologize because what I really meant to say, Brian, is I'm sorry for the way that I am.
Well, I'm sorry about the things I said when I was drunk. I didn't mean to call you that.
No, absolutely, man. But you know what? I can't really apologize over Zoom. I have to apologize in person because you know what? When I embrace you, Brian, and just look in your face, I just see that you have the lips of an angel.
Well, tell my mother, tell my father. What's that band? Is that Shinedown? I'm lost in the butt, Taylor.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, with our very clumsy butt rock references out of the way, that's what
Clumsy,
we're
I
going to
thought
be
that was
covering.
great. That was seamless.
Well, talk about seamless. That's arguably a butt rock song too, Brian. The Corey Feldman and Fred Durst song.
Oh,
It's way more
yeah,
interesting than that,
yeah.
but yes. Corey does have butt rock vocals, let's be honest here.
I think we have more nuanced opinions about this than we're letting on, but I do think that Corey is a more interesting vocalist than virtually any butt rock singer.
No, absolutely. But you know what? Actually, before we get to our segment, I will have to say one thing, Brian, is that I think every day you go through Portland, you just think, I'm sick of the hobos. That's the one thing you think of.
I'm so sick of the hobos. I'm so sick of. He's sick of something else in that song.
I think he's sick of his girlfriend spending all of his
He's
money
sick
in
of his
cash.
girlfriend. Not to give away the ghost there. Theory of a Dead Man came out with that song, I think, the same week that they released a Rage Against the Machine cover.
Oh, God. But, speaking of rageful things, that is our subject this week, which is going to be butt rock. But before we get into our review and segment this week, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe, actually extremely
Cringe,
sad moment of the week.
Yeah, actually extremely depressing, but it's actually a boomer moment, and I don't mean that in a derisive way this week. Kind of urgent breaking news.
Before you say it, Brian, because this is technically my segment, so I'll introduce it, but I know, Brian, you
Yeah.
have a lot of thoughts on it too, obviously. I believe it was literally yesterday at the very, very early morning as of recording, but the director, Rob Reiner, and his wife were brutally murdered in their home, which is shocking to all of us. Like, genuinely, nobody thought that a legend of his caliber and his history of activism and his frankly legendary output both as an actor, director, and producer would end with just a brutal murder of him and his wife. It's really genuinely fucking shocking, like seriously.
Yeah, it literally is like I was like had gotten home from work. I started seeing the article. It's literally I think around maybe 5 o'clock or something, 6 o'clock. I open up my phone after I get home from work, and it's the first thing I see is two people found dead in the homes of Rob Reiner. I go, oh no, but they don't say his name. But so I check the ages, and pretty quickly you confirm that it's him, right? But yeah, so I mean that was my first exposure to it. It really was sudden. It was yesterday in the evening. You were just like, oh shit. It hit pretty hard, and I don't always feel that way about like celebrity deaths. It's just the suddenness of it, and yeah, like you said, the shock of it.
No, absolutely. And obviously, this is still a developing story, so we're not going to say who the fuck did or didn't do it. It's not like with the David situation where it's obvious he wasn't fucking involved. Like, we really don't know who did this fucking brutal murder, which, the last reports that I'd heard before we recorded was that both their throats were slit. Like, it was a brutal murder. This was either clearly like a sadistic serial killer level crime, or this was like a hated passion crime. Like, there's no alternative.
Yeah, seems to have been very intimate. But like you said, it's a developing story. Obviously, that's not really our wheelhouse to talk about. The David thing is a little different. But I think given what we talk about, Taylor, it is more than appropriate that you had mentioned, we had another subject, lined up, kind of our typical cringe subject lined up for this segment. And Taylor said today, he's like, I think we should do Rob Reiner. And I was like, yeah, of course we should. Because, we talk about everything generationally, right? That's kind of we're millennials, and we talk about how we as like aging millennials like perceive shit, right? But one of the things I think I've said, everyone makes fun of boomers. It's like a meme now. It's kind of making fun of boomers. It's kind of like making fun of Nickelback, right? Where it's kind of too easy. And sometimes you'll see basic people doing it to kind of signal that they're cool when you're like, you're not cool. You don't know why you're making fun of Nickelback. You don't know why you're making fun of boomers. One of the things that we've always said, I think, is, when you look at popular culture over the last 50 or 60 years, and even if you look at like satire in art and things and political satire, there, regardless what it amounts to, is that stuff that was made by baby boomers tends to have a little bit more to show for it than art that was made by millennials or even like Gen Xers, certainly Zoomers so far.
No, absolutely.
And I think Rob Reiner you could look at him as like kind of the peak of that, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, he was a Academy Award-winning director. He directed such movies as, of course, This Is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, which, Brian, I know you have a deep personal connection with. You're actually going to be seeing a showing of it with a symphony and several actors, including Corey Feldman, being there fairly soon, which is also an incredible, and obviously this wasn't destined, but it's a coincidence that you had heard about this and planned on doing it like the weekend before he was murdered. Like,
I think
wild.
Literally like 3 or 4 days ago. So there's a screening at one of the halls here. There's going to be a screening for the 40th anniversary of Stand By Me at the Schnitzer in downtown Portland. Portland Symphony's going to be there. You know, all of the actors who played the kids, except for River, of course, they're going to be there. They're going to talk a little bit. They're going to do a Q&A. I'm sure now, you know, it was a celebration of the 40th anniversary, and of course it's still a celebration, but I'm sure it's going to take a somewhat different tone now. So I saw that before the news about Mr. Reiner comes out, right? And I'm like, I love Stand By Me. I watched it all the time as a kid, right? It was like, you know, it was the first time I felt like I saw kids like preteens that talked the way I felt, kind of like how I talked, right? You know? So I watched it a lot growing up, and I've been thinking about it lately. I think about Stand By Me and Spinal Tap on a, no joke, probably a weekly basis. And so I got these things, there's like $200. I got 3 tickets to the Stand By Me thing. It is funny as this is going on. You know, I'm sure everyone that got tickets, I'm sure the actors that are showing up are like, oh, like in the midst of this big celebration for one of his greatest films, you know, this happens, and it is going to cast kind of a hue over that. Yeah, I was made a little post online, you know, a stupid little post on my social media. You know, I think about some of Rob Reiner's work with incredible regularity, with almost a crazy consistency. I think that's true of a lot of people my age, your age, and slightly older, Taylor. I think about probably Stand By Me and Spinal Tap, like I said, weekly. And it's something will just remind me of those movies, and even The Princess Bride, right? Like, these were such big parts of my childhood. And you see them and go, oh, that's like The Princess Bride. Oh, it's like Stand By Me. Spinal Tap's so great. Something that just makes you think of it. And you're like, God, those are fucking good movies. And I gotta say, almost never when that happened did I think about Rob Reiner. I just thought about the work and how great it was. Maybe that's good. That's how he probably would want people to think of it. But think about it. There are 3 of this guy's movies that are inescapable for me. They're kind of just in the ambient hum of my life. I don't think of any of them as my favorite movies of all time, but they're always like there. They're always floating around in my head. And every time I think of them, I think, God, those are great movies. Every time I think of Misery, which like the others is not uncommon, I think, God, that's a great movie. I think, God, the cast is great. God, the pacing is great. And I never thought about Rob Reiner, really. You know, if I was reminded of it, I'd be like, oh yeah, Rob Reiner, he made some great movies. But I never think about him the way that we think about Abel Ferrara, Quentin Tarantino, or like any of these guys, you know, Zala, or any of these guys we talk about, these crazy auteur directors. You know, I just go like, Rob Reiner, yeah, he made some cool movies. But like, thinking about it now, it's like, wow, I think about this guy's movies all the time. I think about jokes that he wrote, things that he conceived all the time. I never thought about the guy, but he has such a unified voice. And it's interesting because you see that cross generations. You can see that from his time on the cast of All in the Family, where he played a young counterculture-based lib, and he kind of provided that perspective to that show. And as he got older, that perspective grew with him. You can watch as the movies he made over the decades, the work he did as an actor and a writer and director change over the decades, but he still has that voice of this kind of very approachable, kind of sardonic, but like everyday way of looking at the world.
You know, that's the thing, though, is that you were talking about the sort of lib thing, right? Like, in recent years, he's had a Twitter account. Well, you know, unfortunately Twitter now. But his Twitter account was very cringe. But I will say, in general, his actions were very based. His rhetorical style was not particularly very based. But his activism, because he was a political activist as well, he was primarily focused on, like, early childhood education stuff, which I thought was really cool, and also sticking it to cigarette companies, which, you know, obviously we're huge fans of sticking it to fucking cigarette companies. Fuck those pieces of shit.
Fuck cigarette companies. And just as an aside, because I'm already seeing a lot of people who probably love Rob Reiner's movies and don't even think about it, going like, oh, I remember Rob Reiner got made fun of by South Park, remember? And it's like, you know, I've defended Matt Stone and Trey Parker, but let's just get this out of the way. That is one of the worst stances that I think Trey Parker ever took, is fuck Rob Reiner for not wanting little kids to smoke. And also, he's fat or whatever.
Their anti-climate change stuff, I would say, is probably their single worst stuff, because it's literally just, there's no evidence behind it. They just said what they were going to say, and making fun of fucking Al Gore, which, you know, to be fair, Al Gore, he also kind of sucks, obviously.
They wanted to make fun of Al Gore because he's funny. And the trans stuff, which they've walked back, thankfully. But just the Rob Reiner thing is like an example of that. And it's literally, what is the thing that you're seeing? And it's mostly like Gen X guys. So like, oh, Rob Reiner, he was on South, they made fun of him on South Park. Like, what is your objection to like that he thought cigarette companies were too powerful? How do you look at that as anything but a good stance to take in the world?
Exactly. How do you see a man who is advocating for increasing early childhood education by taxing cigarette companies and see a problem with that? Like, what is your possible stance
Fucking
against that?
dumbasses.
As a functional person, like, I just genuinely don't understand. Now, granted, obviously, if it was like going to do it by taxing people who make $150,000 or more a year, I mean, if you make $150,000 or more a year, I can understand why you'd have a problem with that. But like, if literally it's just smoking and against cigarette companies, that's fine. Like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, who
Philip
cares?
Morris ain't fucking crying, okay? They'll be fine.
Yeah, they'll be fine. I promise you they'll be fine. As for the lib Twitter stuff, the cringe lib stuff, I mean, it's, we've talked a lot about, like, being a liberal doesn't mean what it once meant. And that's good. That means that, like, kind of the general dialogue is moving left. And we're very clear, Taylor and I both, about how we feel about that. But I do think it's, when you talk about, like, an entertainer who, was a political activist, was first and foremost an entertainer and an artist. It's like, I mean, you don't need them to always be, like, have, like, the best politics in the world, like, to like their movies. You know what I mean? Like, I can understand if you're, like, don't like Tarantino because he's, like, living in fucking Israel and, like, I don't know, like Taylor said, he's jacking off on some IDF queen's feet or whatever. I can understand, like, not liking his movies for that. I would say that in the grand scheme of things, like, what I remember about Reiner's tweets is it was, like, what we'd call, like, it's, like, vote blue shit, right? It's kind of cringe stuff about how kids don't know how good they have it and they're asking for too much too soon. It's just typical kind of bad lib stuff that people say because that's what they believe and that's what they've been taught. But in his, like you said, in his actual actions, in his worldview, in the worldview he puts forward consistently in his art and in his actions as a public figure, very hard to find anything objectionable with that. Like, I mean, again, like Taylor and I both spoke in high praise of some fairly reactionary artists, so I don't think we're in a position to say, like, fuck tragically dead Rob Reiner for saying some stupid, like, God, I was saying some dumb bullshit on Twitter in the 2010s, believe me.
Oh, no, absolutely. Like, even if he was the most annoying person on Twitter, I still wouldn't want anybody to end up like how he and his wife ended up. Like, that is just straight up like a horror that I would wish on almost nobody in the world. Yeah, especially somebody who did good things in their actions on top of it. Like, it's just tragedy. And whoever did it, I hope they go away to prison, frankly, for the rest of their lives. It's horrible.
I am sure, given the nature of the crime, I'm sure that they know who did it already. I would be amazed if they didn't.
The rumors going around is that it is one of his sons. Now, granted, we're not saying this, but that's the rumor that's going around.
Well, yeah, I just mean, given that it happened in their house, it's two people, it's in such a hideous and such an intimate way, it's such an up-close act, they've got to have all kinds of evidence. Not to dwell too much on that part of it. Just to hit it real brief, because again, I don't want to focus on this. Taylor, what you just said, which is no matter how annoying he is, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, which you were saying sincerely, but that's not that different President Donald Trump tweeted today, which is basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't have it right in front of me. Have you seen the truth that Trump posted about Rob Reiner? Can I paraphrase it for you? It is like, he's like, tragically, once talented but now failing has-been film director Rob Reiner, who had driven many people insane and irritated many people with his Trump derangement syndrome paranoia, has been violently murdered. And even though he kept saying he had Trump derangement syndrome, we still wouldn't wish this on anyone. And we're grateful for the time when he was talented and turning out great work many years ago.
Wow. I think that's the nicest Trump has ever said about one of his political enemies. I'm being serious.
It's true. Well, no, it truly is. It's also like, look, there's something about Trump, right, that's so classless that you kind of have to admire, right? And I don't mean that in the lib way. It's like, he's so classless. He has no sense of decorum. It's like next level, like scumbag shit.
Oh, no, absolutely.
It's crazy. He's like, now that this fucking dead guy can't respond to what I'm saying and make me look stupid, I'm going to be he's being passive aggressive with a dead dude.
Yeah, no, it's really fucking tragic. But speking of reactionary dead dudes and other cringe things, this is our RIP to Rob Reiner. We will certainly talk about Rob Reiner in the future, but Brian, I really want to get into the subject for this week's episode because I know it's something we're going to have a lot of opinions on, which is butt rock.
Butt rock.
this is, it's that type of fucking singing. So it sounds like you're getting either fucked in the ass or taking a really bad shit and singing at the same time. That's what it sounds like.
So this is a thing. This is one of those, like, if you grew up around it, if you're a younger Gen Xer, you're an older millennial, when you hear it, you know it thing, we're going to try, I think, to start with, maybe try to come up with kind of a loose definition of butt rock, because I've never really found one. And I actually looked for some today and I couldn't really find one that I found satisfactory.
So I have a bit of a definition. So I'm going to go just straight ahead with it. So butt rock was actually originally a term used to describe hair metal in the 80s. Now, granted, I think there are some butt rock elements to that, especially some of the more grungier, not like grungy like Seattle grunge, but some of the more grungy acts of hair metal I can see a little bit of similarity with. And a lot of later butt rock bands directly aped hair metal aesthetics. Obviously not with the same level of musicianship and talent that a lot
or
of
the same level of fun, even.
Oh, 100%. It was all very dour music for a very dour decade.
Earnest.
No, absolutely, very earnest. But I would describe butt rock as the most succinct definition as essentially synonymous with the genre of post-grunge. Now, post-grunge, as you can guess, is supposed to be the genre that happened after grunge. It makes sense just by the term of it. Now, of course, a lot of post-grunge bands, or a lot of bands that are considered to be post-grunge, actually existed in the era when grunge was at its most ascendant, which is the early to mid-90s. So such bands such as... At its peak, exactly. Such bands such as Bush, Collective Soul, I would argue that...
Seven Mary 3 is out there called?
Yeah, totally. And Live is another band that existed around the same time that grunge did. And it's basically a genre that... So grunge, of course, was a genre that had a lot of very esoteric, sort of very sly, sarcastic lyrics and, the sort of like care-do attitude and stuff like that. But then post-grunge basically eliminated all of that. It had very rudimentary instrumentation, very blunt lyrics, not a lot of any kind of real experimentation. It was very derivative music, especially of grunge, which is why I think post-grunge has critically been a very divisive and I would say generally pretty panned genre in comparison to grunge. And a lot of bands that exist in post-grunge, and even you talk about bands that existed in the same era as grunge, these post-grunge bands, a post-grunge band, I would argue maybe the first true post-grunge band is Foo Fighters. That was a band that was, of course, started by Dave Grohl, the most famous drummer of fucking Nirvana. So it's complicated. It's a genre that both rips off grunge, but also has very deep roots, or at least perceived roots, with grunge that they want to basically ape at any point.
Yeah, I think that's a good summation, especially because there is no butt rock, no post-grunge, obviously no post-grunge without grunge. If I can kind of refine a little bit, so post-grunge is like a musical style, but I would say that what we're talking about when we talk about butt rock is, it is a style, but it's a little broader, and it includes what we'd call post-grunge, but it also includes things we might not call that. When I say butt rock, what I'm thinking of is a type of rock music that is specifically made to be played in the post-grunge era on FM radio, and it maybe has the trappings of something alternative, something countercultural, but basically it's made to be as digestible as possible. It's usually going to be very literal. It might have a dour aesthetic, which on the surface seems similar to grunge, or seems similar to something alternative. The biggest swath of these bands that we call butt rock bands, which again I would say is just a very populist, very quote-unquote capital R rock FM radio genre, is that you've got the post-grunge band, you've got like Live, Creed, of course Nickelback and Hinter are very directly kind of trying to sound like a bad, not at all punk descendant version of grunge. They're taking a lot from Pearl Jam, taking a lot from Alice in Chains, but there are sort of some other strands to butt rock, because again the whole thing is that it's whatever is big and populist and easily digestible, and typically maybe kind of earnest and angsty. Because so you've got the post-grunge thing, but you've got kind of like bands you might almost call like, so there's college rock, right? And then there's like a butt rock adjacent thing. You've got bands like Maroon 5, to me, are a type of butt rock, right? They're not really post-grunge in that way, but there's something farty about them, right?
What's interesting about Maroon 5, and I think there is a case to be made, ironically, the softer they've gotten, I think the more butt they became, to be honest. honest with you, because I think actually early on, even though I was never a fan of Maroon 5, but like Songs About Jane is a fucking fantastic like pop rock album.
Yeah, it's just like a good pop rock. Well, and even like there's even things like I wouldn't call this band post grunge, but Lit, who did My Own Worst Enemy. That's like butt rock that's kind of aping pop punk, right? So that's a bunch of butt heads that heard Dookie by Green Day, right? And we're like, we can do this now. But it's more butt rock than pop punk. The Offspring, who have roots in the I'm gonna say people are gonna get mad if they hear this. I know people love The Offspring. That is coming out of the like LA punk scene. It's influenced by Bad Religion and Agent Orange and shit. But ultimately, what do you end up with? It's this over earnest, kind of very clean, very tight mid-tempo rock music that's kind of putting its like earnestness and its rockness in your face. It's butt. It stinks.
Well, you know, there's another band that I'm thinking of. What was the band that did Iris?
Goo Goo Dolls. So there's a strand of bands who have direct links to actual alternative music who maybe have more bona fides than Creed or whatever, right?
You're correct, but I will say real quick, Brian, the Goo Goo Dolls, I believe that album that Iris was on was the best-selling Metal Blade album ever.
Yeah, that's Dizzy Up the Girl. Goo Goo Dolls started as a legit punk band, a very cool, emotional, melodic, kind of hardcore adjacent punk band. And they gradually become one of the stinkiest of butt rock bands.
Yeah, you know, and obviously we're talking about a lot of bands. To be fair, butt is a genre that I think, encapsulates everything from like early 2000s post-grunge to like, and you mentioned this, I think there is an example of butt to be had from this, but bands like fucking Bad Omens and Falling in Reverse, those are 100% butt bands too.
It is pop music for your coworker who thinks he hates pop music, but only listens to the radio.
It is pop music for guys who are perpetually stuck in the divorce court parking lot.
Yeah, and some divorce court music fucking owns, but this is not the stuff we're talking about.
No, we're not talking about bass divorce court music back in the day, like Bruce Springsteen. This is not that kind of music.
Or break stuff. I would say break stuff is bass divorce rock.
Well, you know, we talk about populist, right? And I think this is a good segue to populist, because this genre in general, just based on its general trappings and aesthetics, is obviously extremely reactionary. Like, all these bands, almost to a one, are like Red State, Trump, MAGA shit. All these guys are fucking MAGA. I would say 95% of them are MAGA.
So what does grunge do, or the alternative rock thing of the early 90s do? It brings kind of a punk aesthetic, a stripped down kind of counterculture, college rock, punk rock aesthetic into the mainstream, where you're not necessarily dressing up, you're kind of just doing your thing and you're being who you are. But that inadvertently, like, just kind of frat bros see that and they're like, that's like me. And they take the trappings, like a lot of these bands, especially early on, they took the angst of Pearl Jam. I think that's the most obvious example. That's the band that they're 201 ripping off, right? And they go, Eddie Vedder's singing about a kid who killed himself. He's singing about like these decayed, acrimonious, loveless marriages. Some pretty heavy stuff, right? But he's like, that's the same as me talking about my fucking bitch of a girlfriend, but my stripper girlfriend.
Well, that's the thing. We talk about Pearl Jam, which I would agree, post-grunge butt rock specifically.
To be clear.
Oh no, Pearl Jam are a great band, especially 10 is like probably a top 100 album for me. It's fucking phenomenal. I will say Pearl Jam, even though they were not the most famous of the like big four of grunge back in the early 90s, but they are the band that post-grunge butt rock absolutely ripped off the most by far. Like, it is no question. I mean, some of the biggest bands like Creed, obviously Scott Stapp is clearly just trying to sound like Eddie Vedder. Like,
he says it's Jim Morrison. That's a lot. He says he's doing Jim Morrison, but he's doing Eddie Vedder.
And to be fair, Eddie Vedder was obviously influenced by Jim Morrison. But yeah, no, it's the copy of somebody who was influenced by somebody. That's what that is, like, just straight up. And you know, talk about the ones that are inspired by Nirvana. Obviously, Nirvana was a close number 2 on that. Seether. Or at least a fairly close number 2. Seether, obviously, great example. I would say as well, Nickelback were pretty heavily influenced by Nirvana.
Fun thing is, listen to How You Remind Me, which is one of the first very popular singles by Nickelback, and then listen to Heart-Shaped Box. How You Remind Me is their version of Heart-Shaped Box.
No, absolutely. And, you know, Chad early on had very long blonde hair, clearly trying to be like the fucking redneck version of fucking Kurt Cobain. You can tell. Yeah. He's even got the similar facial hair. And that's the thing, though, too. I think not only, and obviously, you know, another band that obviously was influenced a lot of post-grunge, a fairly distant third is definitely Alice in Chains. That band influenced a lot of post-grunge, especially Godsmack. I mean, they're named after fucking Alice in Chains.
No, he had not even heard that song at the time, Taylor. Taylor. He had listened to Alice in Chains a little bit, and he thought they were pretty good, but he actually didn't even know they had a song called Godsmack. Where they got the name Godsmack from is because they said getting a herpes sore on your lip is like getting smacked from God. They didn't even know that Alice in Chains had a song called Godsmack.
You know what, Brian? I'm going to believe you, because why would a tribal tattoo guy named Sully from Boston be into Alice in Chains? It doesn't make any sense.
So I think when you look at the influence, there's other influences. Another thing is, like, of course, it's like all of these guys grew up and saw like the big grunge explosion. Soundgarden, another big influence that comes in there. Probably some of them are into Smashing Pumpkins, although Smashing Pumpkins might get a little too artsy for a lot of these guys. I think you see more Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam because that is pretty straightforward rock and roll. I love both those bands, but you know, they're not super weird most of the time, although you don't see as many of these butt rock bands overtly sounding like Nirvana. And I think the reason for that is because Nirvana were a little bit closer to punk. They were a little weirder, right? Like musically, they were a little harder to replicate in that way.
Yes, in the same way, and we're going to get into this on a future episode, but nu metal, right? Like, even though Korn were the first nu metal band and influenced like an entire fucking subgenre, obviously, but there aren't a lot of bands that sounded like Korn. Like, there just really weren't. It was pretty hard to
There's one, it's Cold Chamber.
Well, that's the thing. It was a band that was formed out of the most hot couch guys ever in the most hot couch city outside of the Midwest, Bakersfield, California, trying to like reconcile their love of Faith No More, Mr. Bungle, and Duran Duran into music that made sense. Like that is something that doesn't exist to like a lot of like very standard like fucking hot couch rock guys. It doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, they just wouldn't be exposed to that mix of influences. Actually, one of the things thoughts I had this week listening to a lot of this awful music, most of it's awful, some of it's entertaining, is I actually think even though people always blame Nirvana for influencing the butt rock thing, I think nu metal bands are more explicitly influenced by Nirvana than most of these post-grunge bands are. They're a little more intense, they're a little dirtier sounding. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And honestly, a lot of nu metal bands, when nu metal started to die in the early to like mid 2000s, went into butt rock. So, and there were some bands that always were nu metal, but then their like successor bands became butt rock. A great example is Nothing Face, who is like maybe the most underrated like nu metal band. Like, they are like probably the best B tier like nu metal band ever. I fucking love Nothing.
Probably the best lyrics of any nu metal band.
Oh yeah, 100%. Matt Holt was like a once in a generation level like lyrical talent for that subgenre.
Talking about like some fucking bass lib Bush era albums.
No, absolutely. And then, you know, they later on did a super group with two of the guys from Mudvayne and Tom Maxwell, who was the guitarist for Nothing Face. And they were in, maybe, and I'm not even exaggerating, maybe the worst butt rock band ever. Hell yeah.
So this was in the early 2000s. There were two defaults for popular rock and roll music. There is the mainstream hot topic emo / pop punk, which we'll talk about. We've talked about it in the past. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Or there was the post-grunge thing, right? Those were the two types of popular rock and roll. So you saw a lot of Nothing Face members are a good example. Actual, cool, serious rock musicians start a band that kind of a butt band. Audioslave. It's Rage Against the Machine and Chris Cornell. Like, two of the great artists of the 90s. Like, two of the great rock artists of the 90s. Audioslave sucks. That's butt rock.
It is very butt. I wouldn't quite call it elevated butt. Obviously, I think there is a very
It's just better because of the people that are involved.
Yeah, I think there is a very small micro genre of elevated butt that we might get into later on in the episode, but I would not call that elevated butt. I would not.
Bands, as the sound gets more popular, it gets a little trickier, right? Because some of the bands go more overtly into the 90s, the dark, gloomy Gen X thing. We mentioned Seether. Well, on their first album, they're just being Nirvana, but less weird. Just a more radio-ready Nirvana. That's Seether. But then you've got, like, and I hate this band, this is not me coming. You got a band like Blue October, who are kind of trying to have, like, an 80s goth aesthetic. They have violins. They're trying to sound really gloomy and atmospheric, but they're still doing this kind of overly earnest, look at me, I'm here rocking out, but I've got so much heart kind of thing. You ever listen to Blue October, Taylor?
Oh, I am very familiar with Blue October. You know, hilariously enough, and obviously I don't know if this is like the most visited city, but Blue October play Milwaukee all the time. Every year or two, there's like, oh, Blue October playing the Rave or playing fucking X-Ray Arcade or whatever. And it's like, Blue October again? You guys are always here.
Okay, because what is butt rock? So I know that the term began in the 80s to describe hair metal. I kind of reject that. To me, butt rock is a separate thing from hair metal. Like, this is such a distinct thing. So I don't really ever use that term to refer to hair metal. But there is an 80s precursor to butt rock. And that is Bryan Adams songs. That's Bob Seger. That's shit like that. And you know what? Maybe Bruce Springsteen, who I love, who's one of my favorite artists of all time. But like John Cougar Mellencamp, Bob Seger, that's proto butt rock. And
that's the thing though too.
But that's Heartland music. That's music for the Midwest. And so this is music for the Midwest in the 2000s. It's just earnest, right in your face, up front. What I am is what I am. Rock and roll for working class guys.
Well, that's the thing, and obviously this is way too early to call it elevated butt, but like Bruce Springsteen and that like Heartland rock is kind of elevated butt if you think about it. Like it's obviously got that populist bent to it, but especially a lot of Bruce Springsteen songs, like Born to Run is not something you would ever find in a like butt rock song because they were all about like this is how I feel,
Bruce Springsteen,
I'm mad and shit.
Bruce Springsteen, one of the great artists of all time, but I will more than happily say that John Cougar Mellencamp, that is proto butt rock. Pink Houses, you could hear Chad Kroeger singing that. I'm pretty sure they covered that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Honestly, what's hilarious is, and obviously talk about Nickelback as a band, who are a pretty fascinating band for as much shit as they get in being
the
like
best
and
butt rock band.
No, in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, Brian, I know how much we love that song or that album that was like their fucking Occupy Wall Street album. Is that elevated butt?
It's not elevated because elevated implies that it's very artistically conscious and that it's very well crafted. Nickelback are the butt band, but they're so much better than their peers. Like they're the band everyone makes fun of, but guess what? Their songs are catchy. They have hooks. They genuinely just seem like these dumb guys from Canada who love to play guitar, right? Like you can hum some Nickelback songs. Can you hum a Puddle of Mud song?
Well, on top of it too, their production is fucking phenomenal. They have some of the best production in rock. Like just blasting and just hard and intense. And on top of it too, their drummer is fucking phenomenal. They have a great drummer in Nickelback.
I hate this expression. They understand the assignment, right? So I listened to some Nickelback in the last couple weeks of preparation for this episode. And you know what? Those guys seem to have listened to a lot of the music that they're ripping off. Like they really spent time listening to it. You can tell there are songs where they get heavy and they kind of do a groove metal thing. You know, these guys probably listen to a lot of Pantera going up. That makes sense. There are times when they seem to be zoning out on like kind of Sad But True and other like Black Album era stuff by Metallica. Obviously a lot of like Pearl Jam stuff. Sometimes it's like pure cheese, right? And it's almost like they try to do this weird U2 thing where they have these kind of jangly guitars and they try to like sing like in this really high register and it's weird. But you get the feeling that they love their dumb rock music, right? Whereas when I listen to, say, Hinder, who basically sound exactly like Nickelback, but many, many times worse, I don't get the feeling that any of them ever particularly loved a rock album in their life. Do you know what I mean?
No, honestly, it's very Halloween costume. I'm dressed like a fucking hair metal guy, but I'm also playing music that is aping a band that became popular in 2001. Like, there's nothing really that aesthetically or like musically interesting about a band like that at all. It's very boring and very trite.
Why would you listen to them if you could listen to Nickelback? Because I don't like Nickelback. I can see why people would listen to them, though, right? I can't see why you'd listen to Hinder. Because you have Puddle of Mud and you have Nickelback. You have a million other bands doing the exact same thing, but so much better. And of course, like, I think we kind of did a lot of butt rock. It comes to popularity, maybe not with nu metal, but kind of right after nu metal, right? Is that fair?
Yes, I would say that post-grunge and nu metal were obviously playing in the same spaces, same era for quite a while. But obviously once nu metal like just fucking fell off commercially around 2003, 2004, that was when post-grunge like really like blew up in the sort of quote-unquote rock space. And talk about obviously playing together like
9/11.
9/11, of course, 9/11 was the big thing. And you know what's interesting to talk about nu metal is that some of the biggest nu metal albums actually came out during the sort of nadir of nu metal's popularity, like Fallen from Evanescence and Meteora from Linkin Park are some of the best-selling nu metal albums ever.
Okay.
And those albums came out like a year before nu metal just completely fucking fell off.
I would argue, even though those are hugely successful albums, Evanescence is to me more post-grunge than nu metal. Even I know they are nu metal, don't come for me. But like when I listen to Evanescence, to me they're closer to Nickelback than to Korn.
I would say maybe half the songs on Fallen are pretty strongly nu metal and then half post-grunge, and then the next album after that is pretty strongly post-grunge. And on top of that, to talk about post-grunge, you know, Amy Lee and the guy from Seether, you know, of course we covered him on an earlier Cringe Generational segment where he was getting real honky-tep about fucking Nelson Mandela, which, you know, he's from South Africa, that's based. He can do that. But at the same time, like, they made that song Broken, which was on the Punisher soundtrack, which was not the same Punisher soundtrack as Days of Revenge, unfortunately, but that would have been really fucking funny if it was. That was the Thomas Jane Punisher. The other one was the Ray Stevenson. That was the Ray Stevenson Punisher that came out out maybe a few years after that. But either way, that is a song that was a real combination of nu metal and post-grunge, because that whole soundtrack, that Punisher soundtrack, is the most 50-50 post-grunge nu metal soundtrack maybe ever. It is so those two things.
I mean, like, the thing is, the dudes that were lining up to see that Punisher movie, that was the soundtrack they wanted, though.
Oh, absolutely. And to be fair, a lot of movies that came out around then had a pretty good mix of post-grunge and nu metal. For example, the Freddy vs. Jason soundtrack is pretty, I would say, close to 50-50 nu metal and post-grunge. Basically, any movie that, like, hot couch guys would have went on opening night with their level 1 girlfriends would have seen.
You know, it's funny, like, the butt rock thing, it's kind of like, where does it begin? And we know where it begins, right? It's this very populist, very kind of shallow kind of evolution from the alternative boom of the early 90s, right? Where it ends is, I think, trickier, because it kind of goes in a few different places. So we mentioned some of the post-metalcore, post-screamo bands, Bring Me the Horizon, Bad Omens, Sleep Token. That's the modern butt rock.
You know, in all honesty, Brian, and I'm going to say this very earnestly, and I'm not necessarily talking about Sempiternal, but I would say Bring Me the Horizon are actually fairly elevated butt. I think they have a lot of interesting ideas with them, and especially, even though Sempiternal is considered the best album by that band by most of its fans, but I will say the album after that is probably the most experimental album a butt rock band maybe has done in the 2010s. Like, it is so fucking good. I actually love that album a lot. One more elevated butt thing real quick, Brian, is I do want to get into this at a later point in the topic here, but I think the other element of elevated butt is like bass lib butt guys. Like, straight up, like, you were talking about Chad Kroeger. Chad Kroeger is a huge lib. You know, Chris Daughtry of Daughtry fame from American Idol recently came out with a whole thing talking about how he basically hates everything associated with Trump and MAGA. Gotta respect that. I would have never guessed that Chris Daughtry would have been like a fucking bass lib.
But that actually ties into, like, so that's one side of the elevated butt thing, I think, is more modern artists who are kind of clearly kind of in that field, but they're doing kind of these weirder musical things. They're more contemporary. I would say that there's another thing that on my end I would call elevated butt that came out at the same time as the nu metal and the post-grunge bands. And that is the college rock butt bands, right? The somewhat nerdier, a little bit more Gen X-y, but still very FM radio, earnest guy things. That's bands like Everclear, bands like Eve 6, Semisonic, Third Eye Blind, who are one of my favorite bands of that era. That is the same over-earnest, capital R, radio rock, FM, big choruses, speaks to like a certain type of very literal-minded guy. It hits the same thing, right? But it's usually bass lip stuff. The guy from Everclear, his big pet project is he advocates for single mothers, right? And he hates deadbeat dads and he supports child welfare programs. Stephen Jenkins of Third Eye Blind, huge bass lip. Basically like a white trash frat bro guy who decided he wanted to try to be like Joe Strummer. The Eve 6 guys are like DSA dirtbag left guys on Chapo now. They share some DNA, like it or not. And I think a lot of their fans would be mad at me for saying this. I really believe it. I think they share some DNA with at least your first wave of butt rock bands.
No, absolutely, I agree. And, you know, I do like a lot of those bands, but particularly Semisonic. Semisonic is a great fucking band. I like that band a lot. And of course, obviously, the main guy, I can't remember which main guy, the name of him at the moment, but he's like basically written every fucking like successful pop song of the 2000s. Like, that guy was an incredible songwriter.
He found his niche. You know the song, the fucking Inside Out by Eve 6.
Another band that's kind of buddy, but more, I would say, in the sort of quote-unquote pop-punk side of it is SR71, another numbered band. Because that guy was, you know, Todd and the Shadows covered them for a one-hit wonderland. They wrote the original Bowling for Soup 1985. Now, granted, though, that guy, the main guy, is not elevated butt because he wrote a lot of very reactionary songs, including he wrote the original You Couldn't Make Blazing Saddles Today, like, fucking line in a song.
Oh, God, that shit sucks. So, when we talk about elevated butt, we're talking about things that share the DNA of the corny post-grunge bands, but maybe also share some kind of cool, either artistically or politically based DNA, and it kind of creates this weird cross-section, right? I got one. Listeners who can go back several episodes will remember we talked about Ramallah. Elevated butt?
I would say so, because in all honesty, like, you know, of course, we loved that album. We love White Trash Rob. He talked to the No Jumper guy before he became a literal cuck. You know, obviously, that was a really good fucking interview. And the No Jumper guy used to actually do really fucking good interviews before he became basically a very rich lol cow. Like, that's what the fuck he is now. But, you know, at the same time, like, I would agree. I think that, especially that Ramallah album, which is the only Ramallah I'm really super familiar with, but it's got very, like, that, very populist, like, Boston fucking beatdown vocals with very interesting instrumentation instrumentation, especially on that album, that I said sounds like fucking Faith No More with the fucking symphonic
it does.
keys and stuff like that. It's fascinating because, like, we were joking about Nickelback being elevated butt in regards to that album, No Fixed Address or whatever, where they have like their fucking populist fucking Occupy Wall Street song and their like disco song.
I don't want to get too into this because I'm not the right person to say it. I think that's also the album where they do a funk song, which is cool. Nickelback shouldn't be trying to play funk, but I respect that they just have rewritten How You Remind Me a million times, and they chose not to. In that song, Chad Kroeger duets with a very talented black woman. It's a horny song. It's kind of a dance song, kind of a love song. We are all down with the swirl. But I do want to say that at one point, you know the line I'm referring to. I feel like I shouldn't say it, even though Chad's not saying it in that way. I wish someone would have said, Chad, you shouldn't, it's not good for you to say that to a black lady.
Well, that's what you have to understand, Brian. He's from rural Alberta, which is like the rural Texas of Canada.
It just never occurred to him. Right. It's like, literally, he's just such a nice Canadian guy who just likes rock and roll that he does not understand what's weird about this expression.
He's the type of guy to hit on a black girl and be like, what's up, my ebony queen? That's what he would say.
Well, you know who did that, but in a much worse way, it was famously butt rock pioneer Jim Morrison. The song Hello, I Love You is about a time when he very aggressively approached a black woman who then told him to fuck off, and then he wrote that song about it, where he's like, do you hope to make her see you, fool? Do you hope to pluck this dusky jewel?
God, but yeah, so we've been talking about post-grunge and elevated butt and regular butt for a while, but we did hint at a little bit, obviously, with these sort of modern butt genres, but there's a couple other bands I want to talk about other than Bring Me the Horizon, Sleep Token, Bad Omens, and Falling in Reverse. I would say the most commercially successful modern butt band I could think of that really gained prominence in the 2010s, and Brian, I think you know exactly who the fuck I'm going to talk about, and a band that really exemplifies all the worst traits of 2000s butt and all the worst elements of like 2010s, like just like garbage tier coworker metal, Five Finger Death Punch. So
Five Finger Death Punch, 100% butt rock. Everything about Creed, everything about Nickelback that you hate, that we make fun of, the over earnestness, the post grunge elements. The thing with Five Finger Death Punch, right? Their innovation, if you want to call it that, is that they were slightly heavier. Like they brought a little bit of metalcore, a little bit of like groove metal into it, right? But that's 100% butt rock. It is.
Yes, and on top of it too, like, and to be fair, obviously, I don't like Five Finger Death Punch. I didn't even like Five Finger Death Punch when they were starting to get like prominence, like around like late high school. And honestly, it's not even necessarily the instrumentation. I think they have some fucking amazing instrumentalists in that band. It's mostly the vocalist. Ivan Moody is a garbage vocalist and a garbage person on top of it too. Like, you can't be like, well, he's got some good shit about him, even though he's a bad person. No, he's a bad person and a bad artist. Like, on top of it, like, there's no redeeming qualities of Ivan Moody.
Shitty fucking band. The only song I'm very familiar with by them is that song American Capitalist. Do you know that song?
I'm not familiar with that one, but I know quite a few other ones of them because obviously, I like to punish myself by listening to things I fucking hate.
So this kind of, we talked about the elevated bar, all these different sides. The thing with this more modern, by modern I mean that it's only been around for 15 years as opposed to 25 strand of butt rock, is, it's still coming out of the Nickelback thing, but it's a little heavier. It fancies itself a little artsier, right? The other band that I think falls into this is Avenged Sevenfold, right? So it's butt rock, but now it has kind of artistic pretensions to it, which is very strange.
To be fair, even though I have never liked Avenged Sevenfold either, that's a band that I think, it's a band that I theoretically could like, because they're a band that, talk about instrumentation, they have incredible instrumentalists, like just straight up, like fantastic instrumentalists. Even though I don't like Matt Shadows as a vocalist, I will not deny that he is a very talented vocalist, especially at the type of vocals that he's trying to do. I will never deny that.
Yeah.
But everything about them, from their aesthetics, from their general songwriting to, and this is a much more shallow critique, but also their general fan base, I hate Avenged Sevenfold. Like, even the songs that I quote unquote have liked from them, there's something about them where I'm like, oh God, I can't handle it. Well, it's one of those things too, and there was that whole apotheosis thing, because they were always like, they started early on as a quote unquote metalcore band for, that's the best term I could fucking describe them early on. But they're a band that were always trying to like implement more progressive and heavy metal elements, and then they came out with that just straight up progressive album a few years back that was awesome.
They were like the Mr. Bungle of butt.
Yes, and on top of it too, actually, Avenged Sevenfold did cover a Mr. Bungle song a few years back.
Oh, really? That makes so much sense. I didn't know that, but that makes sense. So I guess the point we're trying to, there are bands that are influenced by the initial butt rock bands. As crazy as that seems, Hollywood Undead, that's butt. That's rap butt rock.
Oh yeah, Hollywood Undead, 100%. Oh, also the song that Avenged Sevenfold covered from Mr. Bungle was Retro Vertigo.
That's a good one.
Which is a fucking fantastic song. I would say my favorite Mr. Bungle album, California, which I'm not sure is a hot take.
There's a band that I have been aware of, and I listened to quite a bit of them over the last couple of weeks, specifically for this episode. And I want to talk about them because to me, this shows kind of the weird way that popular rock and roll music has developed and changed and stayed the same since the initial post-grunge and nu metal boom. And that is the band Volbeat. Taylor, do you know anything about Volbeat?
I know about Volbeat a lot. I first heard of Volbeat probably, I'm going to say around 2009, 2010. I remember hearing it, and I'm thinking, like, and to be fair, I was a nu metal kid at the time, so obviously my musical taste was fairly limited in comparison even now, and I don't even really listen to a lot of new music now. But at the same time, I remember listening to it, and I'm like, okay, so it's metal riffs, and it's a guy trying to sound like Elvis, but he's saying it in a interesting way, and then I looked him up, and they're like, oh, they're from Scandinavia. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, they're Danish. So here's the thing with these bands, you know, whether they're elevated or they suck, what you're seeing is that bands have gone beyond the Nickelback thing, or even the Puddle of Mud, the Stain thing, which is, here's why Stain and Nickelback can sometimes be enjoyable bands, because they are really upfront about what they are. So every once in a while, they just write a really good, simple, dumb rock song, right? But these bands, they have ambitions that should make them better, right? Well, the thing with Avenged Sevenfold is that their ambitions are weird and they're a bunch of butts. The thing with Volbeat, they are one of the most popular touring rock bands in the world right now. They have a dedicated fan base. They are on the fucking radio. I never hear about them. I learned about them by seeking them out. Here's Volbeat's kind of identity. Here's how they see themselves. They mix rockabilly, traditional rock and roll, groove metal, and thrash metal, and like a punk attitude and aesthetic. So to the people that listen to Volbeat, they're like, oh, they're like kind of a modern punk band. These are people who never listen to punk rock. These are people who don't really have any interest in that. But how Volbeat present themselves is kind of like an alternative to like the other butt rock bands. It makes the people that listen to it, I think they feel like they're very much in an in crowd. And it's this very cool, they're like, this is real rock and roll. It's not. It's the corniest fucking metal riffs. And then this crooning, just the worst Elvis impersonator singing. It sounds like butt rock. But when you hear it, you think like, oh, this band is kind of trying to do something. They are trying to do something kind of distinct in their scene. Unfortunately, that doesn't make the butt stink less. It just makes it stink in a weirder way.
Well, what's interesting about Volbeat is, and I think I knew this at the time, but their singer Michael Poulsen, the guy who of course does the very bad Elvis impersonation, started off in a death metal band in like the early 2000s. And although to be fair, Scandinavian death metal is a lot different than like Florida death metal, but at the same time, there is still that like hardcore, like very like guttural vocal element to a lot of those bands. Not necessarily the like the Gothenburg sound of, you know, such bands as like At the Gates and, you know, In Flames and Soilwork and stuff like that. But still, there is a heavier element than a lot of, you know, more, I guess, softer metal in the international context.
And the other thing...
But you know what's interesting about Scandinavia too, right? And to be fair, this is just Europe in general. But like, and you know, I've been to Europe a handful of times, so I can tell you this, as like, you may hear about them online and complain about Americans all the time, but I can tell you, they fucking love hearing that I have an American accent at first. Like, just straight up, like, you know, they'll say like, hello, or like, guten Tag, or whatever, they'll be like, hello, and then I'd say in my very elementary German, oh, Americana, and like, yeah, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, an American, like, they get so fucking excited. So like, bands will like do these things where like, well, we want to be distinct, so we're gonna combine metal with like Elvis and like rockabilly, and like, I mean, they're the continent that are really keeping like rock and metal alive, because the US certainly fucking isn't doing that, I'll tell you that much.
But they're into it in a weird way. Like, I mean, it's good, I'm happy for it, but they don't seem to have the subculture things we do. They just love it all, right?
We'll talk about Scandinavia once again. This is the point I was trying to get at before I got off track. But Scandinavia, they fucking love rockabilly. Like, in all honesty, like Sweden and Norway and like Denmark might be like the rockabilly capital of the world. I'm not joking. Like, they have multiple subcultures that are based specifically on like rockabilly and like southern, for lack of a better word, like Dukes of Hazzard level, like southern cosplay. Like, they love that shit over there. So this isn't surprising that a band like this came out of fucking Denmark. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So all you need to really know about Volbeat, if you have not heard them, they are a post-grunge / butt rock band wherein the lead singer used to sing in a death metal band and has 4 social distortion tattoos. He is the corniest guy in the world. I thought it'd be a fun little treat. I wanted to just read you the title of a few Volbeat albums. Because again, this to me is the preeminent current butt rock band. They're not new. They've been around for a long time. But right now, they're kind of like, for people that are into radio metal, they're like a very hip band to these guys. You know what I I mean? So they're one of the most popular touring rock bands right now. It's the corniest shit I've ever heard. Some of their albums are called The Strength, The Sound, The Songs. That's their first album. Outlaw Gentlemen and Shady Ladies. Cool. Guitar Gangsters and Cadillac Blood. They love to have two phrases in their song titles. That's what I've noticed. They like to be like something something and something something. This band is, again, they're very popular right now. Not just in Europe, but in the States. They get played on the radio. They like headline these rock tours. When are you ever going to hear a Volbeat song? Seems to me like you'd have to go out of your way to hear it. But they're it. Bands like Volbeat, and especially right now, bands like Bad Omens. When are you going to hear a Bad Omens song? But they're one of the biggest bands in rock right now. I don't know.
We'll talk about the elevated butt thing, right? We're talking about Sleep Token and Bad Omens, but a very underrated element of butt rock is that obviously the songs were pretty much universally made by men about men's quote-unquote issues and, alienation and anger. But that's the thing is, though, a lot of women liked a lot of butt rock because, of course, that was just the ambient sort of rock music of the 2000s and 2010s. But the thing that Bad Omens and Sleep Token did that was very different from butt rock of that era was they specifically appealed to women. And I can tell you what, all the Bad Omen fans I know, and a Sleep Token especially, are all like just very first level girlfriend type women in a lot of ways. And to be fair, obviously, I'm not calling them all first level like girlfriend type stuff. And by the way, I know you haven't listened to Chapo in a while. Do you know about the whole first level girlfriend bit?
No.
So it's something that Felix came up with a little bit, but it's basically like the girl that you dated in high school who's like, oh, honey, I got you some fries because I know that's all that you eat. And she's like chewing on like her fucking like jacket strings or whatever, like her hoodie strings.
Yeah, I haven't heard the phrase first level girlfriend, but I've heard him talk about that, yeah.
And to be fair, I'm not saying, if you're a Sleep Token or Bad Omens fan, I'm not calling you like basic or first level or stupid or anything.
Yes, he is.
No, I'm not. To be very clear, I respect all
I'm not
women.
calling you a loser. I'm not saying you have shitty taste. I'm not saying that I don't ever want to see you in public. I'm not saying you should just be barefoot in the kitchen. Ladies, he's saying all of that.
No, I love empowered women. Trust me. I am very much like, who's the guy that did Fritz the Cat?
Robert Crumb. Yeah, fuck yeah.
I'm a very Robert Crumb inspired guy who loves empowered women, if you know what I mean.
Talk about a fucking based boomer.
But no, like that type of music really does appeal to women in the way that a lot of like butt bands didn't. So I think that's the reason why that you might like hear their music from a lot of other people that you wouldn't think. Because like I can't tell you, I've not met a lot of male Bad Omens or Sleep Token fans. I'm sure they exist, but I've not met many. Bad Omens is like basically a like boy band version of like quote unquote metal. And I don't even dislike a lot of Bad Omen songs. There's actually some Bad Omen songs I like, to be honest.
Bad Omens are, so I literally listened to them because I had read people describe them as a metalcore answer to The Weeknd. Now, I don't know if I've ever talked about it on the show. I am a huge fan of The Weeknd. So I was like, I'll check this out. And I was like, this is terrible. And I also thought, that is exactly what this is. He is like trying to sing like The Weeknd a lot of the time. And he's kind of singing about like addiction and like promiscuity. You know what I mean? It's weird.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And also they're on a metal label. They're on Sumerian, which is...
Yeah, like a real metal label.
Yeah, I mean, a label that has had, to be fair, some real bullshit bands. Oh, you know what? Talk about another butt band that absolutely, even though they tried to ape sort of, more alternative, like, Hot Topic aesthetics, but a band that was always super duper butt was Asking Alexandria. That is a giant butt band.
Well, Asking Alexandria, I feel like, and a lot of those bands, they're butt. They also, even though they have the aesthetic, the kind of neo-gothic aesthetic of like My Chemical Romance or something, they're kind of like hair metal bands, right? They're kind of like these big dramatic riffs, soaring vocals, big chanty choruses. Like they're not that far removed from like fucking Poison.
No, absolutely. And if you ever want to listen to something really funny, Brian, they had a real infamous set at Warped Tour this year. I think it was in the DC one, if I'm not mistaken. Dude, it is bad. Honestly, one of the worst live performances I've ever seen.
To be honest, I get Asking Alexandria mixed up with Falling in Reverse, I think.
So even though I don't like Asking Alexandria, I will say Asking Alexandria is definitely a better band than Falling in Reverse. I don't think Falling in Reverse have ever made a song I've even partially liked. And I'm not just saying that because Ronnie Radke fucking blows, because obviously he fucking blows. But their music is so bad and so boring. It is garbage. Like, terrible music. We even covered them on a Cringe Generational segment, that song Video Game.
Yeah. So I remember Falling in Reverse during, like, the height of the Screamo thing when they were pretty popular, like, more than they are now. And they just sounded like every other, like, shitty Screamo band, right? But now, Ronnie's, like, doing a full-on, like, 80s rock revival thing, and it's weird weirder, and it's, again, you would think it getting weirder meant it would get more interesting, but it's exactly as bad, but in a more distinct way.
Yes, I would 100% agree with that. Absolutely. Well, speaking of allegations, I know we covered him on an earlier episode and them on an earlier episode, but a band that mixed all of the butt elements that I can think of in a way where they were oddly commercially successful, but obviously ended in just absolute depravity is fucking Lost Prophets. Like, they're a band that implemented all the butt genres into one.
So that is a band like some of these other bands, but they maybe took it to another extreme. Hard to pin down because they're kind of post-hardcore. They're kind of new metal. They're kind of butt. They're doing all of these perceived shitty genres in equal amounts at the same time. And it's like, what are you doing? And of course, what they were doing was luring in as many children as possible.
No, only one of them did, Brian.
Actually, their new band with the guy from Thursday seems pretty cool.
No, in all honesty, no devotion, absolutely. And, to be fair, as long as those guys weren't involved, and as far as I understand, none of them knew anything that was going on. The only thing that they knew is that he was fucked up on drugs, which obviously he was fucked up on drugs. And if all that's true, then they deserve to have a band afterwards. I'll just say that. They deserve to not have their fucking lives ruined just because they're associated with maybe the most degenerate musician maybe ever. Like, at least in the top 5 most degenerate musicians ever.
He's there with, like, R. Kelly.
Yeah, he's up there with, like, not Ronnie Spector. Who is the other one?
Phil Spector.
Yeah, he's up there with, like, Phil Spector, fucking R. Kelly. I mean, up there with fucking, P. Diddy, Jimmy Savile. Like, just straight up. Those are, like, the top 5 plus Ian Watkins, the most evil fucking musicians of all time, or people involved in the music industry. And that's fucking saying something. Like, holy shit. But you know what? We've been talking for a while, Brian. Do we have any final thoughts before we get to our pluggables? Because we're old as shit and we need to go to bed.
Well, here's what I'd say. If you don't feel any clearer on what butt rock is, maybe we've even made it more complicated. We've given you all these evolutions, all these developments. Listen to a couple of songs by Nickelback. Listen to a couple of songs by, let's say, Stained. And then listen, maybe just to mix it up, listen to, like, Blue October. Because they're kind of on the weirder end of the butt rock spectrum. I think you'll see what I mean. This is very made to be popular radio-ready rock that presents itself as very earnest, very capital R radio rock, but is kind of just whiny, kind of bland. It was the dominant form of rock and roll, except for possibly pop punk in the early 2000s. It isn't really around the way it used to be. There aren't really new butt rock bands like that being formed as far as I know, but there are weird bands that are doing a modern version of the same thing. As far as would I recommend it, I might recommend Nickelback because they have some big, fun, dumb, catchy songs if you're into that. But ultimately, no. If you are going to put on Puddle of Mud, if you are going to put on Seether, you may as well just listen to Pearl Jam. You may as well listen to Soundgarden, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, because all these bands are doing, pretty much by definition, at least the specific post-grunge bands we're talking about, is stealing from cooler bands from the 90s and doing it in a really shallow way. I would recommend some of the more kind of punky alternative, like Eve 6, Third Eye Blind, Semisonic, that I think are butt adjacent. That's some very cool music. As far as what I recommend, Breed, a couple of songs. Jars of Clay has some heavy riffs on it. It's a bad shot. I wouldn't recommend bands like Seether to you. I wouldn't really recommend Puddle of Mud, except for maybe Drift and Die, just to mix up your playlist once in a while.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to say it a little bit more succinctly than you, although I do agree with you pretty much entirely. But I would say look at any major quote-unquote rock festival in a red or purple state, and that is what butt rock is. Like, that is the type of music that butt rock accompanies. Basically anywhere from, like, Rock Fest to, like, Sound Wave or whatever the fuck the one is in Columbus. Incarceration, that was one in Ohio for a while. Basically, if a rock festival is happening in the Midwest, a red state or a purple state, that is the type of music that we are referring to when we talk about butt rock. And I will say as well, I will agree there are definitely some hidden gems in the butt rock side, particularly I would say in the more based lib, as rare as that is, genres of butt rock. But also too, I would say any band of that butt genre that for whatever reason women tend to like, I will say are the butt rock bands that I'm generally the biggest fans of. Like I said, Bring Me the Horizon and Bad Omens to a certain extent, and some of the more female appealing bands of that era and of that sound, I would say are some of my favorites. But just in general, like, even though we've shit on this genre quite a bit, or this general broad genre, if you will, but just like with anything else, there are hidden gems here and there. And if you like it or think of it as a guilty pleasure, don't feel too bad about it. We all have shit that we're not proud of that we enjoy. For example, Brian, I put on my Christmas list Merry Christmas, the Kanye West song that has no other connotations other than just Kanye West all wishing us all Merry Christmas.
I'm sorry, sometimes I can't help but love him. He's kind of like Trump, where sometimes he's just so funny. He needs to celebrate Christmas now, because when he was with Kim, her family never let him decorate the Christmas tree. Not not once.
You know, Brian, I think it was somewhere in the Middle East or India, but a company actually legitimately used Merry Christmas, the rip-off Kanye West HH song in an ad. I'm not kidding. I'm dead serious. It's so fucking funny. Also, another line from that rip-off song that I think is really funny is, all these people don't understand my Christmas list.
Awesome. I love him. I love him.
Yeah, no, even though obviously he is just, I mean, whatever legacy he had, I would argue is almost completely gone in the popular consciousness. But some of the things that he says nowadays...
It's not gone. It probably won't be gone, but it'll always have the asterisk next to it.
It's like when you look at like a very famous like athletes like records like Pete Rose, there'll always be that fucking asterisk next to it due to like some bad thing they did. Although the worst thing Pete Rose did is gambling, whereas the worst thing Kanye West did was inflame some of the worst bigotry America's seen in the modern age.
Kanye is almost like a character that Roberto Bolaño made up for his classic book, Nazi Literature of the Americas. He is that pathetic, that tragic, and that hilarious of a fascist.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, to be fair, I would argue that Kanye West has kind of veered into some butt elements recently because he has Dave Blunt's writing songs for him. And talk about blunt, unoriginal lyrics. Holy shit, Dave Blunt.
I'm going to tell you, there are consistent reportings that there's quite a few things involving butt that Kanye has been into for years.
That is very true. Well, you know, elevated butt, I totally forgot before we get to our pluggables. Mario Judah's elevated butt.
Oh, hey, God, yeah, thank you. This actually was one of my most important points, and I almost forgot, and I'm glad we ended up talking about Kanye so we could get it. When we talk about elevated butt, we're talking about these modern artists who grew up with butt rock, and they're kind of want to do more interesting things. There's this guy out now who is like in his early 20s still, Mario Judah. I do want everyone to go listen to him because his music is insane. I recommend it without reservation. It's so weird. This dude is like, as a kid, he's making beats, just instrumental beats that are kind of psychedelic, kind of like what you'd call rage beats. You know, they're kind of dancey, they're trippy, they're kind of meant to be like vibe based, and he wants people to rap over them. And he can't find anyone to rap over his beats. So he decides to rap, but he doesn't rap. He doesn't really like rapping. He doesn't consider himself a rapper. And he grew up listening to like Linkin Park and Disturbed and shit like that, right? Especially Disturbed. So the dude, he is like a young, like black kid, I think from Michigan, I forget. And he starts doing like a David Draymond, butt rock voice over his vibe-based fucking rage beats. And people make fun of him for it, but I gotta tell you, he is a fucking hell of a singer, and it goes hard. It's unlike anything I've heard. It is modern butt rock. There's no other way around it. And it is so earnest, and he is so about what he's about. And it's such a weird mix of things, but it's totally organic. I think you're gonna see more of that, because what you're seeing now is Zoomers love rock music, right? They're kind of over the poptimist thing. A lot of Zoomers are into rock and roll. But what we're seeing is that for them, rock and roll is all together in a blender, right? So they don't like punk, and then some of them like metal, and some of them like grunge, and some of them like pop rock. You know, if you're a Zoomer and you're into rock and roll, you love rock music for the most part, you know? And you're gonna see more things like that. You're gonna see some cool bands come out that maybe grew up listening to like cool shit like Minor Threat or like Mayhem, and then they'll have like a butt rock element to them. And you'll be like, you know, us as millennials will be like, what the fuck? When do those two things come together? But that's what you're seeing with like kids that love rock music right now, is that they love it all because of the internet, because of like the ubiquity of everything. They have it all, and it's all goes together for them. And I think Mario Judah kind of is pointing towards the future of that. We're going to see this genre the critics hated, that everyone made fun of, that we spent most of this episode making fun of. Some really interesting younger artists are going to rediscover, and they're going to incorporate it into their kind of lexicon. And it's going to get a new life if it hasn't already. It hasn't quite gotten it. We saw it happen with nu metal a few years ago. I think we're going to see it happen with butt rock probably very soon. Or maybe it's happening right now.
No, absolutely. And I want to keep that as a little capstone for a future episode where we're going to talk about nu metal and some other things that will incorporate nicely into what a lot of modern acts are doing. But that is our episode on butt rock. So let's get into our pluggables. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please subscribe and follow us on both our YouTube and our Spotify channel, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously to both platforms. And as well as always, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father campaign. You know, of course, we just had Scott, Sean, and Robert on the show to talk about updates to Lucifer and the Father and some of their other projects. They were great guests and good friends to the pod as always. And they are every day making progress on not only Lucifer and the Father, but some of their other projects. So we really want to support them. We want to get the word out there. They're cool dudes. They've, like I said, always supported us. They've always been good friends to us. And we want to make sure that their dreams become even more of a reality than they already are. So please donate to their crowdfund for Lucifer and the Father and their other projects today. Straight up. They're awesome guys.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite episodes that we've done. Just that think we've all gotten more comfortable talking to each other now, you know what I mean? And I think it was a really cool conversation. Please donate a few bucks to them, because Taylor and I are going to match whatever you send. You send them $10, we're going to send them 10 each. Send them 5, they're going to get a total of $15. I think when you hear this episode, you'll see why we want you to donate, because they are such cool guys. They're so chill. And I do think they have defied a lot of, maybe preconceptions, even preconceptions that maybe the two of us had when we watched and reviewed The Reconciler about filmmakers and artists in their kind of milieu. They gave us a lot of insight in being an independent filmmaker. They frankly were very forthcoming with us. It was a great time. We want to see them do more work. I'm really excited for what they're doing with Lucifer and the Father, and I'd be proud to help them realize it.
No, absolutely, 100%. As we talked about the matching funds and all that. But, speaking of matching funds, cool dudes and people who are just fighting the system as we know it. But, of course, we've been talking about Luigi Mangione and his defense fund for a long time. Last update, and the one that they're really hoping for, and in any normal trial, this would have been fucking thrown out, obviously. But his defense are now arguing that the evidence that was gained in the initial Altoona arrest was fruit from the poison tree, because not only for the first 17 minutes was he not Mirandized, but arguably the cops did not have probable cause to not only detain him, but also search his supplies, backpack, and other things that he had with him. And on top of that, the quote-unquote officer, obviously, I mean, they are employed, but they seem even shitty by fucking cop standards, because that should tell you something. They turned off their body camera during the search of the evidence, and then when they turned it back on, it just magically appeared into his fucking backpack. Now, here's the thing. To the audience at home and to other people who are like, well, Luigi did it, but I agree with him and stuff like that. It is becoming more clear by the day that he is not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Even if there's a small chance that he did it, there is no way you could convince a normal person with all the manipulation and evidence that has been just fucked up and everything has been going on that he could possibly have a fair trial. There is nothing going on here that's remotely fair to him. He is 100% being set up as a patsy at this point.
Every piece of evidence that comes out, it indicates more and more clearly that they do not have a case against him. Like, this whole investigation, whatever evidence, circumstantial evidence may point to him potentially doing it, whatever circumstantial evidence made them look at him as a suspect, whatever they had, they fucking blew it. The way that they carried this all out, from the fucking moment they stepped into that McDonald's to today, they have mishandled it, they have abused their authority, both the prosecution and the police involved, pretty much at all levels. Like, how could he possibly have a fair trial? He wasn't, Mirandized. Like, this is a fucking farce. And again, they want to push it through now more than ever, because they want you to know that they can do it. They want to show you that they can do whatever they want to anyone, just a normal guy just like you. We can do this to you too. That's why it's important still, every day that goes by, to still talk about Luigi, to still write to him, to still send money to his legal fund, because the reason they want to do this to him is so that we all have to see it, and we all have to know that they can do that to us too.
Exactly. They're trying to string up this guy who just happened to have a similar jacket as the guy who did it. Doesn't even have the same fucking face just from the masked view of it. And on top of it too, right? Like, they're like, well, he was at the McDonald's and he seemed shaky. The officer said his finger twitched. That was what he said on the stand. Like,
also, talk about a bunch of cops just ran up on him. Like, he was maybe nervous.
Yeah. He's a guy who is experiencing, and obviously we all experience this, but he was a guy who was experiencing a bit of a mental health crisis. He had a fake ID with him. That could mean fucking anything. And by the way, a fake ID that was brought up in the quote-unquote evidence, so who the fuck knows? They could have planted that for all the fuck we know.
Yeah, exactly.
And, they're talking about, well, he gave false identification to a cop, but, like, first off, that's not illegal to do. You don't have to give your identification, especially if you're not under arrest. Like, he wasn't being detained. He was just the guy at a fucking McDonald's eating his hash brown, and, like, 15 cops were like, who are you? Like, that would scare me.
That would be a little stressful, I gotta say.
Yeah, so obviously Luigi's being strung up, but obviously he has a huge base of support, especially among people our age and younger, and even in general, like, even people a little bit older than us have his support. He's got a certain amount of resources from his family. He's gotten well over $1 million from his defense fund. He's got really good legal representation, but even so, he's facing 2 state governments and the barrel of the federal government. So he needs all of our emotional support. If you can support him financially, both Brian and I have donated to the Crowdfund, but if you can, please donate. And just like with the Lucifer and the Father campaign, we will match any funds, reasonable funds, let's just say about $20-25 to that campaign, because of course we believe in Luigi's innocence. Once again, not guilty, but his innocence, because we believe Luigi is just 100% innocent. Like, every day it's becoming more clear that he's being strung up just because they can. Yeah. And the New York City fucking police department were embarrassed they couldn't find this guy right away. Just like how the fucking Rhode Island or whatever state that was are embarrassed because the Brown University shooter hasn't even been identified yet. A guy who did a mass shooting and they don't even have any identification at all. They don't have, like, anything. It's wild. Like, the surveillance state has failed even finding mass shooters at this point. And obviously a lot of mass shooters have been fucking egged on by the FBI. But
the one time they bother trying to stop or catch a shooter, yeah.
But, talking about things that are also being set up by the state to fuck us over, we also have a Patreon account. Now, of course, last time I checked, we don't have any Patreons, but become a patron of ours today. We have the $5 tier, which is where you get every episode 48 hours early, because we always say the first 48 hours are the most important. When you're just talking your, basic coworker, normie coworker, who's always like, oh, did you hear about that new band? The one where the guy is like combination of like Eminem and Seether and Evanescence, but he also sounds like he's singing like Bruce Springsteen. And you're like, oh, that sounds really good. I can't wait to hear about it.
That sounds awesome, man. That's sick.
Well, that's the thing, is that you could hear about our thoughts on all those artists today on this fucking episode. So you would know exactly how to talk about this coworker, about this band's new song, which is my fucking bitch ex-wife who sucks, but she's also really good in the sack. You could know everything about that song before it even comes out.
I just had a thought that I think we should jump in here. There is butt rap, and you should check out Dax if you don't know.
Basically, if there is a Instagram reel musician, they're making either butt rock or butt rap. Talk about butt rock, somebody we didn't talk about, and we will certainly talk about them on a later episode because they're fascinatingly terrible. But Kill Carl. God, that guy sucks ass. Holy shit, that guy's terrible.
Oh, yeah, that motherfucker.
Yeah, the guy with the handlebar mustache who basically just makes like very epic millennial lyrics.
I can't stop listening to it.
No, that guy fucking rocks. He's very butt rock for sure. That guy is just amazing. I will never get over. And of course, Dax, obviously. And never mind, we'll get into more butt adjacent subgenres in a later episode. But yeah, absolutely listen to Instagram reel musicians, either butt rap or butt rock for sure. And then Brian, do you have any pluggables?
Yeah, you can follow us at Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram and Threads. And also follow us on the Facebook page, Millennials Are Old. Again, we're uploading every episode as they come. We're posting them as they come. But that is the best way to engage with me, particularly in regards to the show. If you want to argue with us, if you're really mad that I said that Stained are butt rock, because you actually think that they are groove metal, if you like the episode, if you want to kill me because of what I said about Matt Forney and the Pickup Artist episode, which, by the way, I am actually getting really nice feedback on. I think we're both really proud of that Pickup Artists episode, and we look forward to doing more content like that in the future. But yeah, if you need to, murder me because you love Rouge V, that's the best way to hit me up. I am personally as JLo Biafra, all one word, on Instagram and Threads as well. Probably won't add you on Instagram if you add me from here. Threads is fine.
No, absolutely. And I think with all that out of the way, Brian, I think this episode, even though it was good, I think it's a stained on our record as people, but I hope it doesn't hinder our future employment prospects. And, for a while, I've been thinking, just recording this episode, I'm tired. I'm just dead tired. And man, I have a theory that one day we will make enough money to where I can give somebody $1 and they give me a nickel back. And also, Brian, next time I see you, man, because I'm going to see you next year in Portland, I'm absolutely going to give you a fucking 5-finger death punch. I can tell you that much because you fucking pissed me off, bro.
I gotta tell you, if I got sleepy, would you still call me podcast man? That's 3 doors down, you guys. They're awful. That's butt rock. There's so many of these fucking bands, so many of these terrible songs. Listen to any 3 of them and you'll get the idea, I promise.
No, absolutely. And I hope, Brian, you give me some grace for at least 3 days or more.
I'll give you a whole week of grace, baby.
Hell yeah. Okay, I'm done now. All right, have a good night, everybody. Sleep tight. We'll come back with a great episode for you next time, as always.